All right, let's get right into this. We're going to be looking at a really personal account from Sun Myung Moon, from a talk he gave back in 1977. And this one, well, it pulls back the curtain on the early years of his marriage, revealing a story he'd kept private for a very long time. It's all about the choice of his wife, Hak Ja-han, and the pretty incredible ordeal that came after.
And that's the line that just grabs you, right? I mean, can you imagine being in that room and hearing him say that? It immediately signals that what's coming next isn't just a history lesson. It's a personal revelation, a story he held close for almost 20 years. It really sets the stage for something powerful.
So, let's set the scene. The whole story kicks off with a decision that didn't just cause a few ripples. No, it sent a massive shockwave through his entire community.
The year is 1960, and the buzz is just palpable. Everyone who understood the core teachings knew that Moon, who'd been completely focused on his mission for 15 years, would eventually marry. So the question wasn't if, it was who. And you know what? A lot of people thought they already had it all figured out.
And it's pretty fascinating when you see who was expecting what. You had entire families who were convinced, based on their own divine revelations, that the bride would come from their house. Then you had these respected spiritual elders, these prophetesses, who just assumed they'd have a major say in the decision. And then, of course, you had the more worldly, logical candidates. University-educated, prominent women who just seemed to fit the bill. And on top of all that, there was this assumption about age. Moon was 40, so it just made sense that his bride would be mature, probably in her 30s.
And then, bam! Without consulting any of these groups, he made his choice. Hak Ja-han. And she checked none of the boxes. She wasn't from a big family known to the church leadership, she wasn't a university grad, and she was a teenager. As the source says, she was relatively unknown, and the choice was an absolute shock to everyone.
So you can just feel this massive gap opening up between what everyone expected and the reality that just unfolded. A huge mismatch between what the community thought was logical and what actually happened.
And you can see the disconnect so clearly here. On one side, you've got the community's perfect candidate, a mature, educated, well-known woman. And on the other side, you have the reality, a teenager, pretty much unknown, from a different region. Every single logical expectation was just turned on its head. It was like they were looking for a queen who was already prepared, and the choice felt like someone who needed to be forged into one.
And here's the crucial part. The reaction wasn't just mild surprise. No way. Because everyone's hopes had been so sky-high, the disappointment, as Moon describes it, was profound. This created an unbelievably tense and difficult environment right from the very first day of the marriage.
And that tension, it leads us straight into the heart of this story. Because the wedding wasn't the beginning of a celebration, but the start of what Moon himself calls an ordeal, a trial period that was going to last for 7 years.
7 years. Think about that. And this wasn't random. He says this was a deliberate, necessary period of time, even calling it mother's training session. It was a trial designed to establish your position not through glory and praise, but through sheer endurance.
This timeline really breaks it down for us. The ordeal started immediately after the wedding in 1960. For the first 3 years, it was her individual test, a personal struggle to win a victory in the sight of God. After that, for the next 4 years, the test got bigger, expanding to include the entire family.
So what did this test actually look like? Well, first, isolation. Her own mother was told not to visit freely, but to come secretly through the back door, putting her in what the source calls a miserable, cast-out position. Second, servitude. Moon states he treated his new bride almost like a servant to have her start from the very bottom. Third, she had to endure these heartbreaking rumors that she was a failure and that she was going to be replaced. And through all of this, she had to maintain absolute silence and just persevere.
And here's the kicker. Moon explains that he never told her why this was all happening. There was no comfort, no, hey, this is just a test, hang in there. Nothing. He felt that if he'd explained it, her victory wouldn't have been as valuable. She had to figure it out entirely on her own and win based on her own understanding and her own faith.
So, after 7 years of this intense, silent trial, how did it all resolve? Well, this brings us to the victory that was won through this whole process.
It wasn't like a switch flipped one day. It was a slow, gradual transformation. Her steadfastness, her patience, and her refusal to complain just slowly started to turn the tide. The very same people who had been disappointed or spreading rumors began to see something different in her. And that atmosphere of accusation and doubt, it was replaced by one of respect, and then admiration.
This quote just captures that final shift in how people saw her. The community came to a universal conclusion, all on their own. It wasn't just a title they had to accept anymore. It was a deeply felt recognition, something she had earned right in front of their eyes.
And her victory also had a direct consequence for her mother, who had shared in all that suffering. Having endured her own cast-out position, she could now be publicly honored. Moon explains this was essential from a theological point of view, making sure that she received that glory in her own lifetime.
So, why tell this incredibly personal and painful story? Moon concludes the talk by explaining that this isn't just about his family. It's a lesson, a universal principle for everyone else to understand. He frames it with this concept, the blessing of the glorious heavenly throne. But here's the thing, it's not something you're just given. It's something that has to be earned. And the place where you earn it isn't at the top, but at the absolute bottom, at the lowest level of human misery. Only then, he says, can it last eternally.
And that's really the core takeaway. He applies this principle to himself, saying his own role started in a dungeon. He applied it to his wife, and he says it would be applied to his children and all the members. True, lasting blessings are found by overcoming hardship in the lowest places, not by seeking glory in high ones.
So how do you walk this path? He distills it down to one essential quality. He warns that if you become self-centered and you start to complain, you lose your position. The key to persevering and winning in that lowest place is selflessness.
And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to reflect on, doesn't it? This entire story just turns our conventional idea of success completely on its head. If true authority and blessing are forged in trials and misery, it completely redefines what the path to any kind of glory actually looks like.